Has been lifted. Here is what his owner had to say about his quarterback. Robert Kraft said this: "As I said during this process and throughout his Patriots career, Tom Brady is a classy person of the highest integrity. He represents everything that is great about this game and this league, yet with absolutely no evidence of any actions of wrongdoing by Tom in the Wells report. The lawyers at the league still insisted on imposing and defending unwarranted and unprecedented discipline. Judge Richard Berman understood this, and we are greatly appreciative of his thoughtful decision that was delivered today. Now we can return our focus to the game on the field." Well, not really, because there's going to be an appeal. Mark Schlereth is here. Thanks for being with us.
It's my pleasure.
Always good to have you. Mark, how do you view Brady now that he's won essentially at this point?
Listen, I've never really viewed him any differently throughout this whole process, which has been fairly ridiculous. I always viewed this as being pulled over for going 72 and a 65 and then spending a year in jail for it. The whole process to me has been ridiculous, and this is more about culture of the National Football League. There has been, since the inception of this league, people who have circumvented the rules. And you don't have to go far in any team to look at how they've circumvented the rules. And it's dealing with circumventing those rules. Cheating, in this case. Just because the excuse is not, well, everybody does it, right? So, and that's kind of what I'm laying out here. Everybody does it, doesn't make it right. But the thing is the league has never really punished it before. It's a slap on the wrist. It's, hey, let's send out a letter, say, guys, we know you're doing this, please stop doing it. And this has gone to an extreme, this extreme kind of quote-unquote witch hunt that obviously Judge Berman decided, I disagree with the way the league went through this process with and I heard you talking this morning, the fairness of this process. And so I've never really viewed Brady any differently. I mean, he is one of the greatest, whether he did, whether he didn't, whether he had general awareness, whether he didn't have general awareness. It really wasn't a big deal to me in the overall scheme of things, because I understand the culture of this league, and I understand they're trying to change the culture of this league. I think they just went about it the wrong way.
Yeah. Can I say, to your question on what do you think of Brady, it seems to be tough for people to realize and to separate what you think of Brady and what you think of this case. I'll take myself for example. I think the world of Brady. I think Brady is one of the best quarterbacks of all time, and from what I've been told, a great guy, a great teammate, a great friend. But I also think he looks very culpable in this situation, and that his punishment should have been upheld. They're not one and the same. You can think highly of Brady and think this punishment should have been upheld. We often seem to think these are just proxies for how we view the Patriots. Like, I'm just a Patriots fan or I'm not a Patriots fan. I'm a Brady fan or I'm not a Brady fan. That's not what this is about. It's not about being emotionally attached to any one emblem or human being. You can hold both opinions. I think Brady is great. He will go down as great. And when it's all said and done and somebody writes his obituary in the New York Times, this will be a very small line towards the end. Possibly non-existent.
Of course, emotional attachment to a team or an emblem is actually what fuels sports. So for most fans to detach emotionally from their player isn't possible, right? So for a lot of fans, how you feel about whether due process was served is actually completely tied up in whether or not you like Tom Brady. Right. For me, I am not a Patriots fan, and I feel the exact same way about Tom Brady today that I felt 2 years ago. And Mark, you made the analogy of like going 72 and a 65. The way I felt about this whole thing was like you're playing pickup basketball and all of a sudden somebody calls travel. You don't call travel and pick up basketball. And then all of a sudden you're like, hey, that's a travel. Like, oh, we're calling that now? We're calling all travels now? So for Tom Brady, I always felt like he kind of got caught in this situation where he's playing a game one way and all of a sudden the league and everybody around him is like, we're calling that. And you didn't know that that was going to be called. Right.
And I think Judge Berman pointed out in this in his 40-page document the notice general awareness. No notice of a 4-game suspension for general awareness of what's going on here, for general awareness of the quote-unquote violation. And that to me is a really important part, because if we're going to start suspending guys 4 games for general awareness of what's going on, we have to shut down the NFL season, okay? So if I'm in a locker room and I have a general awareness that one of my teammates is using Does that make me culpable to a 4-game suspension for a steroid violation? I have general awareness.
That's a good
That
point.
dude is a user. And now all of a sudden I can be suspended for that. The hypocrisy of the league, and the problem with this is there's so much hypocrisy, and I think that's where everybody's looking at the league right now as being besmirched. So I can go into, you want to talk about as an offensive player and playing in this league for 12 years, I guess enhancement or unfair advantages. Let's call it unfair advantages, the deflated ball. This year, the Atlanta Falcons and Rich McKay, who is the president, CEO of the Atlanta Falcons, it was found that they were pumping crowd noise into their stadium. Okay, now that is far more an egregious violation and an advantage than some deflated footballs or potentially deflated footballs. Being an offensive player coming out of the end zone, you know, in Atlanta or in New Orleans, if they're pumping crowd noise in, impossible to hear the snap count. The one advantage I have is snap count. When coming out of the end zone, they're on turf with trained pass rushers. That's a huge advantage. Rich McKay is the head of the competition committee. I believe their violation.
Yep.
Yes, their violation was, I think it was $350,000 and maybe a 5th-round draft choice for doing that, which to me is far more egregious. That was the violation. He spent what, a month, 6 weeks suspended, and now he's back as the head of the competition committee. When you're doing that, so that's the problem, the public relations problem the NFL is facing right now.
A couple quick points. You're 100% right about the general awareness. If you are culpable for what you might or might not know going on around you, you'd empty out not just the league, but massive amounts of society would also be in trouble.
Right.
But the NFL did make the point in other places that they thought Tom Brady was not just generally aware, but participated in a scheme to deflate the balls. They made some mistakes when they limited their language to general awareness in certain areas. So I think they were alleging more than just general awareness. And real quick, on this idea that it's called in the middle of a game. If Tom Brady's culpable, and the notice requirement sort of hinges on that, right? Were you unnoticed this was wrong? He was never under any impression that this was okay to do. It was never under any impression that this wouldn't be called.
That's why the analogy is to a travel in a pickup basketball game. You don't call travels in a pickup basketball game. Do we all know that sometimes when you take an extra step, it's technically a rules violation? Sure, a travel is a rules violation. In a pickup basketball game, you all kind of agree not to call offensive fouls and not to call travels. So now in the middle of the game...
Great lengths went to covering this up. Great lengths went to making it look like nothing to see here. So I have a hard time believing New England Patriots or Tom Brady or John Jastrzemski or McNally believed this isn't that big a deal. Their behavior simply suggests...
Their behavior is a reaction. It's a reaction to the NFL as well. Because deflating, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but the infraction of deflating footballs in the NFL, on par with a lot of other sort of like small-time cheating, is not unheard of on a game-by-game basis. I
don't know about the deflation of footballs, but I do know there is a lot of cheating that goes on in this league, and there always has been. And that's part of the cultural issue that they're trying to change right now, and I understand those changes. But you could go back. There was a game, I believe, in November where the Minnesota Vikings were caught warming up the footballs with the heaters on the sideline. Complete violation of the rules. Why were they not drug into this? Why are those things not being brought up? Because the NFL is looking at it, and I do believe this is a Lifetime Achievement Award. We want to go after the New England Patriots, and there's a lot of jealousy between owners. Right? There's a handful of owners that say, we want to see, we know they've done things that are not above board. We're not going to look at our own sins, but you know, our sins are minor compared to what those guys are doing, because those guys are a bunch of cheaters, and they are basically forcing this issue. And I would hope that the owners would look at this situation, what's good for the game, and say, we need to make changes. But the bottom line is money doesn't care who owns it. So it doesn't matter, you know, just because you have a lot of money doesn't make you a guy that's going to make intelligent decisions. It doesn't make you a guy that's going to make reasonable decisions. And so I look at the ownership and say, I hope it's a catalyst for change. I don't know that it's going to be, because they continue to get beat up in court, one after the other, after the other, after the other. I hope it's a catalyst for change so that they can come together and collective bargain these things.
Well, and they're trying to make all these changes at 100 miles an hour. I mean, their house is out of order, and they got caught with this in a dead sprint. At what point are they going to realize they got to slow down, maybe reevaluate
Be proactive rather than reactive.
instead of just making all of these decisions when your house isn't even in order on what you are disciplining?
Right, so as soon as something like this happens, we're reactive as a league. Then we commission a study, and we bring a bunch of people in that have never been inside a locker room, never coached a team, never played, and they make what they think is a reasonable decision on how we're going to go about this. And there's no collaborative nature between players, between the Players Association, and between the NFL. And ultimately, if you don't have that collaboration and you're not in lockstep with that, it's just never going to work out. So why they wouldn't do that, why they have adhered to this, the commissioner's got the ultimate autonomy and authority to do whatever he wants, it really makes no sense to me why they wouldn't actually collaborate. But there is, bad blood between the two, that's for sure.
I feel like they also pull public opinion as well, too, and do factor that in as well, especially we saw that with Ray Rice.
No question.
Mark, thank you so much for being with us.
Always a pleasure.
Have a fantastic Labor Day weekend.
I will, thank you.
You enjoy with the fam. We'll see you soon. And up next, we're going to talk about the quarterback Tom Brady faced in the Super Bowl. Russell Wilson locks in on a fat new contract with the Seahawks. Good for him. Now, can Wilson and the Hawks look onto a third straight Super Bowl trip? It's the NFC bottom lines. That's next. Stay here.